It was the day of Parents' Day. I managed to get off work early and hurried straight to the school. The outside was terribly hot and I was sweating buckets, but thanks to my non-stop walking without being distracted, I somehow made it just before the start. When I arrived at the school, I saw the other parents all dressed up nicely, and that's when it finally hit me. My own shabby appearance. I had been so preoccupied with keeping my promise that I had completely forgotten. The class was English, and apparently the activity was to read aloud the essays they had been assigned as summer homework. I wondered what topic Susan had chosen to write about. The other children seemed to be writing about their summer experiences, telling me in their still clumsy English where they went and what they played here. With each one I heard, my anxiety grew. This year, she only has sad memories. On top of that, even the promise of a precious summer vacation was broken. I really shouldn't have accepted that favor to help out. And then, at last, it was her turn to stand up. The title is about my grandma. I was nervous. Not only because Susan had called on me, but the moment she started reading, dozens of eyes turned towards me. For people who didn't know the situation, they probably couldn't understand why a grandma was here, and so I was exposed to curious stares. I had no problem with it myself, but I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to her. My grandma is a big liar. Cold gazes rained down on me in my shabby work clothes. That alone would have been one thing, but when I heard snickers leak out from unseen corners, my heart crumbled with a crash. Grandma, read this. Okay, just a minute, my glasses. I, Nancy, can barely read a thing now without my reading glasses. Luckily, it's a children's book, so there are no difficult words, and the text is fairly large, so it's on the easier side to read. When I finished reading, I noticed my granddaughter Susan had fallen asleep. She'll probably beg me to read it again the next time I visit. Seeing Susan's sleeping face, I understood anew the saying, I wouldn't trade her for the world. No matter how many times I see her, she's just so precious to me. Susan, it's about time to head home. Oh, she's asleep. Mom, did you put her to bed? She asked me to read to her, so I did. And then she fell asleep. My son Robert and his wife must have finished their errands, as they came to pick up Susan, but the girl herself was deep in slumber. It's getting late. Why don't you two go out for dinner together for once? Letting her stay the night is no problem at all. I'm definitely hungry, but... Are you sure it's okay? Absolutely. Plus, if it's a sleepover, won't this little one be thrilled? Well, if you insist, then I'll take you up on that. I'll bring over a change of clothes and everything for her later. With that, Robert gazed lovingly at his precious daughter, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and then left the living room. I'm sorry, Nancy. Please take good care of Susan. Of course, you two go and enjoy yourselves. I'll make sure to feed her dinner properly. And so, I saw them off at the front door, watching as their car drove away into the distance. Little did I know those would be our last words to each other. It's been 5 years since I lost my husband to illness. And now, I've been left behind once again. From their perspective, perhaps passing away without suffering was the only small comfort. I never imagined I would lose not only my husband but also Robert and his wife at such a young age. The pain is unbearably excruciating. But what about Susan? She lost both her parents at such a tender age. The circumstances she has been placed in are far more tragic than mine, as I'm just living out the rest of my days. I have to protect Susan, no matter what it takes. So from now on, my remaining years will once again revert back to life. With their bodies laid before me, I vowed this in my heart. Reality and the ways of the world are so fickle, and they can be especially harsh when it comes to money, more than necessary. It's not that I never felt this before, but when I had to raise a child again at this age, it really hit me hard. At this rate, we'll hit rock bottom before long, and not in the distant future. I had a job to begin with, and it's not like I have no savings, but that alone is nowhere near enough to cover living expenses and tuition for two. Right now, I need to stay by her side and support her. But once things settle down, I'll have to take on more work. It'll be lonely for Susan, but if everything falls apart because of that, it'll all be for nothing. It pains me to think of how she must feel, but there was no other way. A few days had passed since the memorial ceremony. Susan's emotional wounds were far from healed, but I knew I had to take action sooner or later to protect her future. And for that, I needed Susan's cooperation too.
Susan, Grandma's thinking of taking on more work. It means you'll have to stay home alone a bit more, but will you be okay with that?
Yeah. I'll be fine.
I see. Thank you, sweetie. I'll try to find work I can do while you're at school.
Grandma, you've lost weight.
Oh, really? That's so nice of you to say.
I knew full well that wasn't what she truly wanted to express. But if I didn't joke around like this, awkward silences would creep into our conversations again. These weren't good times for either of us. And in fact, I had lost a considerable amount of weight since the memorial ceremony ended. I couldn't recall skipping any meals, so it dawned on me that I too must be suffering from emotional trauma. When Susan pointed it out, I realized that in her own way, she was looking out for me. If that was the case, I couldn't afford to show any weakness. I then applied for a job cleaning office buildings within walking distance of our home and was fortunately hired. Alongside my existing job doing office work at a local factory, I fell into a routine of heading straight to the office building to clean after work and returning home past 7 p.m. Amazingly, my weight started increasing rather than decreasing, and when I looked into it, I learned that muscle weighs more than fat. It was far from easy, but feeling the changes in my own body, I felt like I could do anything if it was for Susan's sake. As for Susan, she seemed blessed with good friends and often shared stories about them with me. She was still far from her usual cheerful self, but her expression grew a bit richer when talking about her friends. I played with Betty today. We drew pictures and colored them in. I'll draw a picture of you next time, Grandma.
Really? I'd love that. I'll be looking forward to it.
If only I could capture this single page in isolation. A beautiful scene depicting the modest, ever so modest happiness of a grandmother and granddaughter. But countless scars marred the reverse side, and more would accumulate in the days to come. For example, if Susan were to say, "I want that. I want to take lessons," it might be difficult to grant those wishes. The pain in my heart was excruciating as I turned her down, knowing how much a child her age would resent such a thing. When I thought about the not-so-distant future, I was plagued by an unshakable sense of guilt and the helplessness it brought. But those weren't reasons not to cherish this amazing page in our lives.
Phew, I'm full. What? Grandma, you've barely eaten anything. I've put on some weight recently, dear. The number on the scale keeps going up, so I'm trying to watch what I eat.
If a little white lie and an empty stomach could ensure Susan grew up healthy, at least physically, it was a small price to pay. Besides, the lie wasn't entirely untrue. Susan remained silent, not commenting on my words. The air conditioner in the factory office was on its last legs, barely pushing out cool air. On a sweltering summer day, with school vacation just around the corner, it was almost unbearable. Later, when I arrived at the office building for my cleaning job, I was met with a refreshingly cool interior. The building wasn't particularly new, but thanks to my coworkers and the maintenance team, most of the equipment was well maintained. Nevertheless, it was physical labor. Air conditioning could only do so much to combat the heat, and the more I moved, the more I sweat. But she would be waiting for me when I got home. That thought alone made me willing to sweat buckets with a smile on my face. When I arrived home that day, she was waiting for me at the front door.
What are you doing out here? I told you to keep the AC on because it's so hot.
I figured you'd be home soon, so I came out a little while ago to wait for you. The door to the living room was shut tight. If I strained my ears, I could just make out the hum of the air conditioner.
Well, as long as you're okay. So, why did you brave the heat to wait for me?
Look at this, Susan said, a hint of pride in her voice as she unfolded a large sheet of paper. The text was too small to read clearly, but I could see a big red "Great job" written in the top right corner. I got a perfect score on my test.
That's incredible, sweetie. I'm so proud of you for working so hard.
I had never once told her to get good grades or even to study hard. I rarely had the time to say such things, and truthfully, I didn't really want to. I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but at least Susan had put in the effort to study hard, and she had achieved impressive results. Most importantly, when I praised her, she smiled. It was the nostalgic smile I hadn't seen since that day. It was a bit late, but I decided we would go out to eat today to celebrate. However, the best we could afford was a nearby family restaurant.
How is it, Susan? Is it good? Yeah, it's good.
Susan had chosen the spaghetti with meat sauce. She may not be the right age for the kids' plate anymore, but she's still a child at heart. Her mouth was slightly stained with sauce. Her smile had faded, but it wasn't her usual heavy, cloudy expression. Just seeing that made me incredibly happy. That's when I casually thought of something.
Hey Susan, do you want to go to the amusement park sometime?
Susan thought about it in her own way, and made me feel genuinely happy from the bottom of my heart. If that was the case, then it was my turn to respond to her feelings. Thanks to my efforts to push myself, I had just enough leeway to afford a day of fun. Really? Are you sure it's okay?
If Grandma says it's okay, then it's okay. Or do you not want to go, Susan? If not, Grandma will go alone.
I want to go, but...
Then it's settled. We'll figure out when to go another time.
Okay. She might still feel a sense of inferiority. Unless there are extraordinary circumstances, there's no way a child her age wouldn't jump at the chance to go to an amusement park. Our family has those circumstances. Even as a child, she seems to be quite mindful of that. Our household finances aren't comfortable enough to be optimistic, but they're not so tight that we can't even take the occasional vacation. It may be difficult for her to understand that difference, so I have to show it through my attitude, even just a little.
You have sauce on your mouth.
Summer vacation was now in full swing. With just 2 days left until our promised outing, I received an unexpected phone call.
Hello?
The voice on the other end belonged to Barbara, the manager of the company contracted for cleaning services at the office building where I work.
Oh, hello, Nancy. I'm sorry for calling so late. Do you have a moment? Yes, of course. Is everything all right?
Apparently, there had been a small accident during the afternoon cleaning shift, and one of the senior cleaners had suffered a head injury. Given the nature of working in a high-rise building, they decided to err on the side of caution and give the injured worker some time off to recover, but this meant they needed someone to fill in for their absence.
I'll be covering this shift tomorrow, but Nancy, I was wondering if you might be able to help out the day after?
I almost blurted out.
Of course, no problem.
But managed to swallow the words before they escaped my lips. The day after tomorrow. The day I had promised to take her to the amusement park. What should I do? My emotions.
You should decline. You have a prior commitment.
Pleaded. On the other hand,
they're always flexible with letting you leave early when you need to, so you should accept.
My sense of obligation argued.
Give me just a moment. Let me check on something.
After a few agonizing seconds, I broached the subject with a heavy heart. Susan, honey, I'm so sorry. Grandma just got asked to work the day after tomorrow. It's okay. I'm not a little kid anymore. And hey, we already had pizza together. Her matter-of-fact response made my chest tighten. I'm really sorry. Next time, we'll go to an even bigger amusement park, okay? Yeah, okay. I tried. This is for her sake, too. To convince myself. I knew I had to do something to keep my heart from being crushed. By the end of summer vacation, I couldn't find enough time to take her to the amusement park as promised. Susan talks to me normally without saying anything, but there's no doubt she's harboring some resentment. Then came a day, after several days of uneasiness.
Parents' Day?
Yes, it's this Friday. I want you to come. After what happened the other day, I couldn't easily make that promise. But I thought I should keep my word this time, no matter what.
Okay, I'll definitely keep my promise this time.
I had to keep it, no matter what it took. On the day of Parents' Day, I left work early and hurried to the school. It was terribly hot and I was sweating buckets, but thanks to my diligent walking, I made it just before the start. When I arrived at the school and saw the other parents in their nice clothes, I finally realized how shabby my own outfit was. I had been so focused on keeping my promise that I had completely forgotten about it. But it was too late to do anything about it now, so I just tried not to mind the stares. The class was presentation, and they were going to read aloud the essays they had written as summer homework. I wondered what topic Susan had chosen to write about. The bell rang. The children, who had been noisy until then, all quietly took their seats. The other kids seemed to be writing mainly about their summer vacation experiences, saying things like I went here and I played there. With each presentation, my anxiety grew. This year, Susan only had sad memories. And on top of that, her long-awaited summer vacation promise had been broken. I really shouldn't have taken that job. Finally, it was Susan's turn to stand up.
Title: About my grandmother.
I tensed up. Not only because Susan had called on me, but the moment she started reading, I could feel many eyes turning towards me. Anyone who didn't know the situation would wonder why a grandmother was here. And that made me the subject of curious stares. I didn't mind for myself, but I was worried sick about how it would affect Susan. My grandmother is a liar. Those unexpected words flying out of Susan's mouth pierced my heart. It seemed Susan had been holding a grudge after all, even if she didn't show it. I was the only person in the classroom who seemed old enough to be called grandmother. Cold stares rained down on me in my shabby work clothes. That alone was painful enough, but then I heard snickers from somewhere, and my heart crumbled with a clatter. I squeezed past the crowd of parents with my head bowed and left the classroom. There were still some parents in the hallway, but it was better than being in the classroom. Susan was reading her essay in a much louder voice than the other children. Thanks to that, I could hear the contents even from the hallway if I listened closely.
My grandmother tells a lot of lies for my sake. She leaves food for me even when she's not full. She lies and says she's on a diet even though she's skinny. And she lies and says it's no big deal even when things are tough.
The content wasn't the accusatory tone I had imagined.
I hate that my grandmother endures not buying herself nice clothes. I hate when she apologizes for not being able to buy me clothes. I hate when she apologizes over and over for not being able to take me to the amusement park. I hate that my grandmother endures so many things and lies for my sake. But I love my grandmother for being that way.
It seemed I had been worrying for nothing. I had resigned myself to being blamed, but it appeared Susan was earnestly thinking of me. I couldn't help the tears welling up.
Please stay my beloved, energetic grandmother forever.
When Susan finished reading her essay, applause erupted, incomparably louder than before. When I returned to the classroom after Susan finished her read aloud, several parents who had been giving me cold stares rushed up to me and started apologizing and expressing their respect. Among them, one person approached me with different words than the other parents. "Are you Nancy? My daughter is always in your care."
Well,
as I hesitated, the mom in front of me said,
"Oh, I'm sorry,"
and then introduced herself.
"I'm Karen. My daughter's name is Betty. She and Susan are really close friends."
Betty. It sounded familiar. As I searched my memory, I was able to find that name surprisingly quickly. It was the name of the girl Susan had mentioned drawing pictures with.
"Oh, Betty's mom. We're the ones who should be thanking you for always taking care of Susan."
I've been wanting to properly meet and talk with Susan's parents. Susan is so well behaved, I was curious what kind of people her parents are.
Is that so? I'm a little relieved to hear she hasn't been causing you any trouble.
So, Susan's parents aren't here today? Not only did Susan not say anything, but she didn't reveal it in her attitude either. The thought of having to give even a simple explanation made me feel a bit depressed, but it couldn't be helped. Actually.
Oh no! I'm so sorry for saying something insensitive without knowing the circumstances. No, it's okay. So, Nancy, you're raising Susan on your own? Yes. It's a bit tough, but...
You have my deepest sympathies. Raising a child is hard even with two people.
But that also makes me an experienced veteran at it. Susan is so much better behaved compared to my son at that age. There's no comparison.
After that, I got to spend some precious time hearing about how Susan spends time with her friends. By the way, sorry if this is rude, but what do you do for work? From what I heard Susan say earlier, it seems like you're really pushing yourself.
It's not as bad as all that. I've been working in the administrative department of a local factory for a long time, and I recently started cleaning office buildings too. Cleaning office buildings? Ah!
Karen's sudden outburst startled everyone nearby, including me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
She made an embarrassed smile, her face turning red. But what on earth did she realize? Sorry if I'm mistaken. Is the office building you clean perhaps the center building nearby?
Yes, but how did you know?
I knew it. I kept thinking I'd seen you somewhere before, Nancy. My company actually has offices on the 4th and 5th floors of that building. We must have passed by each other there.
Really? It really is a small world.
If you'd like, would you consider working for us? We were just looking to hire an administrative assistant. It seems like you have a lot of experience, Nancy. I think you could get much better pay and benefits compared to your current job. It was an unexpected offer. If the pay and work hours really would be better than now, there was no reason to refuse. The hardship Susan said she hated might decrease, and more than anything, being able to spend more time with her would be a dream come true. Let's talk about the details another time. I'm sure you can't decide right away with everything going on. For now, I want you to see how well the kids are getting along. In the direction of her gaze was a heartwarming scene of Susan, Betty, and a few other children happily gathered around the same desk. Ever since becoming friends with Susan, Betty says school is more fun than before. That's why I'm so grateful to Susan. And of course, to you too, Nancy, for raising her to be such a wonderful girl.
Susan, maybe, but I haven't done anything special. I've just done what any parent should, even if our circumstances are a bit unique.
Then please, take care of yourself, even just a little. If anything happened to you, Susan would be devastated. Maintaining my current situation of juggling multiple jobs. It might be fine now, but in the long run, if something were to happen to me, it could leave Susan alone again. And from what I heard, the salary wouldn't be much different or might even be a little higher. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became that I had no other choice. For Susan's sake, I had to take action. And so, I quit my longtime job at the local factory and as a cleaner, and became an administrative assistant at the construction company Karen and her husband ran. The senior employees who welcomed me were about a decade younger than me, and at first I was worried if I'd really be able to continue working there, but everyone kindly supported me in various ways. That alone was reassuring, but what supported me the most was Karen's presence. Nancy, it seems Susan is over at our house playing again today, so don't worry. Please feel free to go home together with her.
I'm always imposing on you like this. I'm so sorry. Thank you for everything.
Come on now. You don't need to be so formal. As far as I'm concerned, you're a colleague who has a child, Nancy. Karen always looked out for me, pushing me to acquire even higher-level computer skills and treating me so well in every way. And it was all thanks to Susan. It wasn't just my work environment that changed. As the time I got to spend with Susan increased little by little, the way I interacted with her gradually changed too. Perhaps because she felt a bit more at ease now that my life had settled down, Susan herself was slowly starting to return to her true self, if only slightly. One day right before winter break.
Susan, want to go to the amusement park?
Really? I want to go this time.
It's okay. I won't lie to you anymore.
The wounds on her heart were surely still far from healed. They might never fully heal, even if it took a lifetime. But I could help fill those wounds. Until now, I had been too focused on the practical aspects and may have neglected that too much, just as Nancy said. Now that I could do that, even a little, the time had come for both of us to change bit by bit.
Grandma is going to dress up as nicely as she can, so you need to pick out a cute outfit too, Susan.
Okay. 9 years have passed since then, and today, Susan graduated from high school. She'll be going to the state university. For these past 9 years, I worked desperately as an administrative assistant at the company Karen and her husband ran, and managed to get Susan into the university she was aiming for. Susan herself also studied fiercely while working part-time, and passed the entrance exam without issue. The two of us were overjoyed just last month when it happened. I was filled with deep emotion. Grandma, thank you.
What are you saying? This is the result of your hard work, Susan.
That's not what I mean. I might cause you a little more trouble, but thank you for always taking care of me.
I just did what I had to.
I tried to say that, but the words got stuck in my throat and wouldn't come out. Instead, what came out were endless tears.
Hey, I still have things I want to say, so don't cry.
Susan's voice was tearful too. That time on Parents' Day in elementary school, when I called you a liar. I'm sorry. But I really hated it. The fact that I was making you suffer more because of me. So from now on, I'll be the one supporting you, Grandma. Let's stick together, okay?
I'm the one who should apologize for putting you through such a hard time. I'm so happy you grew up to be such a fine young woman.
My vision was blurred with tears and I couldn't see Susan's face clearly. Ah, I've gotten old.
That's right, Grandma. Let's go out for pasta tonight. How could I possibly receive a letter from Diana who has passed away?
I was staring in shock at an envelope in my mailbox at home. The letter was from my mother-in-law Diana, whose funeral we had just finished yesterday. Diana had always been so kind to me since the beginning of my marriage, and I adored her. We often dined out together and enjoyed shopping, becoming close friends despite the age difference. I was heartbroken when Diana passed away suddenly. Even after the funeral, I couldn't fully accept the reality of her death. So, when a letter from Diana arrived, I was incredibly surprised. Rushing to read it, I found something totally unexpected. Firstly, the reason this letter came to me seems to be that Diana had asked the church's pastor to deliver this letter to me after her passing. It instructed me to open the closet in Diana's room at my in-laws' house, revealing a secret door. The letter detailed how to open this secret door. And at the end, it instructed me to open it alone. Checking the time, I knew that Jimmy, Diana's brother-in-law who lived with her, his wife, and their kids would all be out at school or work. I headed straight to my in-laws' house, used my key to get inside, and followed Diana's instructions to open the secret door in her closet by myself.
Thank goodness, it opened.
Relieved that it opened successfully, I checked what was inside.
What is this?
My name is Olivia. I'm a 35-year-old web designer working remotely. 5 years ago, I married Fred, who is 4 years older than me, introduced by a friend, and we still have a great relationship. However, we don't have any children yet. Both of us love kids and wanted to have them as soon as we got married, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to conceive. There was a time when I was deeply troubled and depressed about not being able to have children, but there was someone who always treated me kindly. That was my mother-in-law, Diana.
Olivia, don't overthink it. There's no need to rush. How about we go to the new waffle shop by the station to change your mood?
Diana always encouraged me and spoke kindly to me. She was bright, kind, and empathetic. I loved her for that. Diana saved me many times, and gradually, I worried less about not having children. My desire for children hasn't changed, but we've decided not to undergo serious fertility treatments and let nature take its course. My husband, Fred, often travels for work, so when Fred is away, Diana and I would go out for meals or shopping, just like friends despite our age difference. Diana lived close to where Fred and I lived, in the same house as my brother-in-law, Jimmy, and his family, who have 3 children. Though Diana seemed to get along well with Jimmy's family, Jimmy and his wife often hurled insults at us for not having children. Olivia, still no kids? We have 3 adorable ones, you know.
It's like you're dishonoring your parents by not having any. Just cut ties with Diana already.
Brittany, Jimmy's wife, would say such things with a triumphant look, and Jimmy would join in, mocking us.
Brittany's right. Well, Fred has always been a bit of a loser, and even if you had kids, they'd probably be losers too.
In the beginning, Fred and I would fight back against their cruel words. But as they never seemed to listen, we gradually stopped responding. We started to avoid Jimmy and his wife as much as possible. They were awful to us, but in front of Diana, they pretended to be nice. So Diana never knew their true nature. We didn't want to worry Diana unnecessarily, so we never told her about Jimmy and his wife's behavior. One holiday, Fred, Diana, and I planned to go out to eat. We headed to the in-laws' house at the agreed time. Usually, Diana would be waiting outside the front door, ready to go, but not this time.
Huh? Is Diana not yet ready to go out today? That's unusual. She'll probably come out soon.
Fred and I didn't think much of it and waited for Diana to come out. But even after 5 and then 10 minutes, she didn't appear, and she didn't answer her phone either.
What's going on with Diana?
Getting worried, we decided to ring the in-laws' house doorbell. When there was no response, we used our spare key to enter.
Hey, Mom!
Fred called out as we entered, but there was no answer. Feeling uneasy, we hurried to find Diana and discovered her collapsed in a room.
Diana!
I screamed as I ran to her, and Fred immediately called an ambulance. The in-laws' house was empty, as Jimmy and his family must have been out, leaving no one there but Diana. The ambulance arrived in about 8 minutes, and Diana was immediately taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, she passed away. It was a stroke. Fred and I couldn't accept the sudden departure of Diana from our lives. We both cried so much we thought we might run out of tears. However, there was much to be done, such as preparing for the funeral. We couldn't remain saddened and withdrawn forever. The funeral was to be a small affair with just close relatives and family, with Diana's eldest son, Jimmy, serving as the family representative. For Diana's sake, Fred and I began preparations in coordination with Jimmy. Yet, even as we contacted relatives and met with the church, I sensed an air of reluctance from Jimmy. He didn't seem to mourn Diana's death, but at the funeral, he fulfilled his duties as a family representative, at least minimally. However, after a brief chat with the relatives, I immediately called for Fred. Since I left the gathering so abruptly, the relatives looked at Jimmy with displeasure. Furthermore, at the meal with relatives after the funeral, Jimmy was the first to take his seat and showed no intention of standing up again. Even if Fred made greetings, he just drank beer. Brittany, too, was just drinking beer beside him. So Fred and I hurriedly went around to the relatives, thanking them for coming and sharing memories of Diana. Perhaps influenced by their parents' behavior, Jimmy and Brittany's 3 children were engrossed in their handheld gaming devices. Laughing loudly and playing with each other, an inappropriate behavior for a post-funeral gathering. None of Jimmy's family seemed to mourn Diana's death. The relatives must have sensed their attitude as they avoided speaking with Jimmy and his wife, choosing instead to share their farewells and memories with Fred and me. Even as the relatives' attitudes changed overtly, there was no change in Jimmy's family's behavior. They kept ordering beer after beer, talking about the inheritance and plans for vacationing during their break. It was disrespectful, considering how much Diana had done for them during her life. I couldn't help but look at Jimmy's family with disdain. The next day, Fred left early to take care of various formalities. Alone at home, I went to check the mailbox for the newspaper and noticed an envelope inside. Who could it be from? I picked up the letter to check, and to my surprise, it was addressed to me and the sender was none other than Diana.
How could there be a letter from Diana?
Surprised, I went back into the living room to open the letter. The letter contained something entirely unexpected. It appeared that Diana had arranged with the church's pastor to send this letter to me after her passing. The letter included instructions to open the closet in Diana's room at the in-laws' house, how to find and open a hidden door within the closet, and the contact information of a lawyer Diana had dealings with. The final instruction was to ensure I opened the closet alone. I read Diana's letter over and over. Though Diana was slender, her handwriting was large and forceful. Indeed, the powerful signature that seemed to embody Diana's very essence made me take a deep, refreshing breath. Deeply moved, I looked at the clock. 9 a.m. The in-laws' house should be empty now. I murmured to myself, quickly got ready, and headed to the in-laws' house. The children should be at school by now, and Jimmy and his spouse likely left early this morning. I saw on Brittany's social media this morning that she and Jimmy were going out together. Despite it being the day after Diana's funeral, they seemed to be sending the kids to school and boasting about enjoying their day off using vacation time. If that post was accurate, no one would be at the in-laws' house. I had to go now. I couldn't be sure when another chance would come. Using my key, I opened the door to the in-laws' house and entered slowly. The absence of Diana's welcoming smile made my heart ache. Holding back the pain in my chest, I went into Diana's room. Opened the closet, and then reached for the hidden door inside, just as the letter had instructed.
Thank goodness, it opened.
I sighed in relief upon opening it successfully and checked what was inside. There, I found the items mentioned in the letter and an additional document.
What is this?
Looking at the documents, I felt Diana's love and was on the verge of tears. I wanted to stay and cry, but I knew I had to leave the in-laws' house quickly. It would be disastrous if someone were to come back and see me here. That is because Diana's letter had instructed to do this alone. With the documents in hand, I returned home and contacted the lawyer mentioned in Diana's letter to inform them of her passing. Just as I was about to contact Fred and Jimmy's family to see if we could all get together this weekend, I received a message. It was from Brittany. The message said they had important news and wanted everyone to gather at the in-laws' house this weekend. What could Brittany possibly want to discuss? I have nothing but a bad feeling about this. I was skeptical, but it seemed odd to refuse, so I decided to accept Brittany's suggestion. When Fred and I arrived at the in-laws' house over the weekend, I joined the meeting feeling tense. Jimmy and Brittany were smirking unpleasantly, and their 3 children were not present. Likely left with someone else. As soon as Fred and I sat down, they presented us with a document.
This is Diana's will,
Brittany declared confidently. The signature on the will was indeed Diana's, and it stated that all her assets were to be inherited by Jimmy and his wife. It says here that we, the couple, are to inherit the entire estate, doesn't it? So, you guys won't get a single cent from the inheritance. Too bad. Jimmy laughed vulgarly, his face twisted in an ugly grin. Fred was perplexed, but I silently stood up and returned with Mr. Smith, the lawyer who had been waiting outside.
Who is this?
Jimmy and Brittany were confused by the sudden appearance of the lawyer. Fred was also surprised, not knowing the lawyer had been waiting outside. This is Mr. Smith, a lawyer who Diana had been close with for many years. I introduced him briefly, and Jimmy and Brittany's expressions turned to anger.
A lawyer? Why did you bring someone like that here?
It was Diana's instruction. She wanted Mr. Smith to help with the property settlement agreement to make things smoother. Jimmy shouted.
We don't need a lawyer.
He slammed his hand on the table and gestured to Diana's will with his chin.
Mom left a will. We don't need a lawyer with this.
At that, Mr. Smith calmly raised his hand. Are you certain this document was entirely written by Diana herself? In response to that question, Jimmy raised his voice. Of course it is. Mr. Smith shook his head sadly at the scene. This cannot be recognized as a valid will. A holographic will must be entirely handwritten by the person themselves. Mr. Smith pointed out that the word will at the beginning and Diana's signature at the end were indeed handwritten. However, the rest of the document looked like it had been printed from a computer. The once noisy living room fell silent. In a panic, Jimmy reached for the will and brought it closer to himself. But that changed nothing. The printed, neat text remained unchanged. The handwriting of the signature and the rest of the document differs. Could this will have been forged? At Mr. Smith's suggestion, Jimmy and Brittany visibly trembled.
What are you talking about? We would never do such a thing. Why are you being so paranoid? And even if it was forged, what then?
Mr. Smith responded to Brittany's words.
Forging a will is a serious crime.
Jimmy and Brittany's faces turned pale. They were flustered, shouting incoherences and making excuses. At this moment, Mr. Smith delivered the crucial information.
Olivia has a notarial will, so this will is invalid. What?
Jimmy and Brittany were astonished, their eyes wide open.
What's that? We weren't informed.
The letter from Diana that I had received mentioned that a notarial will was hidden behind the secret door in the closet. We didn't know either until we received a letter recently. Diana revealed the location of this will in it. The letter contained not only practical matters but also explanations about why the notarial will was made and why it was disclosed to me. Diana had been feeling her health decline recently and prepared a will, but it seems she suspected that Jimmy and his spouse might tamper with it. I had assumed Diana was completely unaware of Jimmy and his spouse's true nature, but it appears Diana had some inkling of their greed for money. The notarial will stated that the estate was to be equally divided between Jimmy and Fred.
What? How could she have prepared something like this?
Jimmy and Brittany were in shock, their eyes wide with astonishment. At that moment, Jimmy seemed to have an epiphany and exclaimed loudly,
"That's right! But the beneficiary of Mom's life insurance is me, isn't it? It must be set to me, the eldest son."
To Jimmy, who was shouting with his eyes blazing, I announced in a cold voice, "In addition to the notarial will, Diana also entrusted me with a life insurance policy. I am named as the beneficiary." Inside the hidden door of the closet, there was not only the notarial will but also the life insurance policy. Jimmy and his wife stared at the notarial will and the life insurance policy in disbelief.
"I didn't hear about this. I don't know anything about this."
It's normal not to be notified when the beneficiary of a life insurance policy is changed. Jimmy protested, banging on the table, but Mr. Smith was firm. Fred, looking puzzled, asked me, "When did Mom entrust Olivia with these?" I had no idea. Did she not want to tell me? I smiled at Fred and explained, "It was written in the letter from Diana. She wanted to tell you as well, but it was safer to entrust it to just me to avoid Jimmy and his wife catching on." I see. You and Mom were really close, after all. While Fred and I were talking, Brittany interrupted us hysterically.
"I won't accept this. Why should you, who never even showed Diana your children, inherit her estate? This is ridiculous. I can't accept this at all." "That's right. You childless ingrates don't deserve Mom's estate. We lived with her just for the inheritance. It's outrageous to split it. The entire estate should be ours."
Jimmy, too, was red-faced and yelling. Brittany continued with her selfish claims.
"We have 3 children, you know? As compensation for not giving Diana grandchildren, you should relinquish the entire estate to us for our children's future. We, who gave her 3 grandchildren, are far more worthy than you. So, the estate should all be ours."
Unfazed by Brittany's fervor, I calmly stated, "What you're saying is nonsensical. Please calm down." Brittany, infuriated by my composed demeanor, yelled,
"Your smug attitude is infuriating. Just give us the money. Useless woman."
As she screamed, Brittany lunged at me. Fred and Mr. Smith quickly intervened, but Brittany managed to punch me in the head before they could stop her.
"Ouch!"
Brittany's hands, adorned with several large rings, felt like brass knuckles, causing a dull pain that made me cry out.
Stop it!
Fred and Mr. Smith pulled Brittany away, but she, still unrestrained, reached out to me again in her frenzy.
Give me the inheritance. I deserve it all more than you do. I have 3 children, after all.
Brittany's eyes were bloodshot, her face demonic. Jimmy, encouraging Brittany in such a manner, an enraged Fred called the police.
Go on, do it more!
Soon after their arrival, Fred and Mr. Smith explained the situation to the police. Jimmy and his spouse were then taken away by the police. Left behind, Fred and I thanked Mr. Smith and decided it was best for him to go home for the day. What was supposed to be just a discussion about creating a property settlement ended up being a terrible ordeal. Fred and I solemnly agreed to visit later with some sweets as an apology. Fred was very concerned about me being hit by Brittany, but when I told him that the headache had completely subsided, he seemed relieved. Amidst the tumultuous developments, I muttered to myself, "That was quite an intense experience." Then, Fred shared his thoughts with me. "You know, Brittany always makes a big deal about her kids. She's always said how great she is for giving Mom 3 grandchildren. Don't you think she's too obsessed with money?" Indeed, Brittany had always overly emphasized her children, and her greed for money earlier was intense. Well, yes. Even with the inheritance, Diana wanted to divide it equally, but Brittany wanting it all is a bit abnormal. The look on her face when she was hitting me was terrifying. Right? It's kind of abnormal. Fred fell silent, lost in thought. What's wrong? Is something bothering you? I asked, unsure of what Fred was getting at. Yeah. There's something I've been thinking about. I want to suggest to my brother that we should do DNA testing for his 3 children. I was taken aback by Fred's unexpected suggestion.
DNA testing?
Yes. And I'm thinking of suggesting an investigation into Brittany's background too. Something just doesn't sit right with me. It's just a hunch. Although I felt it might be unnecessary, I knew Fred's instincts had often been right in the past. All right. If you think so, let's propose it to Jimmy. When Fred brought up the matter with Jimmy, Jimmy ridiculed and yelled at him fiercely.
Just because you can't have kids, don't go doubting mine.
Though Jimmy shouted in protest, he snatched the DNA testing information from Fred as they parted, which might indicate some underlying concern on his part. The first results to come in were from the DNA testing of Jimmy and the children. It turned out that the 2 youngest were not biologically related to Jimmy.
I had my suspicions about the youngest since they didn't really resemble either parent, but the middle child too.
Fred was speechless. Perhaps motivated by the results, Jimmy also conducted a thorough investigation into Brittany's background. It was revealed that Brittany had relationships with multiple men even before marrying Jimmy. Moreover, she had recently been discovered by the wives of her lovers, who then demanded compensation from her. Brittany, who spent more time at home than Jimmy, had been meticulously hiding this correspondence. The total amount of compensation demanded was far beyond what could be covered by Brittany's salary or savings. As a result, Brittany was desperately trying to secure Diana's entire estate for herself. Naturally, this led to a violent confrontation between Jimmy and Brittany, throwing objects at each other and engaging in a physical fight. Their confrontation escalated to the point where blood was shed, and a neighbor, unable to tolerate the noise any longer, called the police. The arriving officers ended up taking both parties away. Already under scrutiny for forging Diana's will, now they've committed an assault as well. When the police investigated the 2, it seems they uncovered numerous other offenses, including theft and harassing wealthy individuals. As a result, Jimmy and his spouse were sentenced to prison. Fred and I were deeply troubled about what to do with the 3 children left behind. With Diana gone, we were their closest relatives. We considered taking them in, but ultimately decided against it. The children had fully absorbed their parents' attitudes, openly disparaging us as incapable and childless. The eldest, Ricky, 14, was certainly old enough to understand right from wrong, and even the youngest, at 7, should have some sense of appropriate behavior. Yet, each time they saw us, all 3 sneered and hurled insults. Even with their parents' arrest and being at the heart of the turmoil, their attitudes remained unchanged.
We'd be doing you childless losers a favor by letting you raise us.
We never expected such words from a 14-year-old. Faced with such hostility, we felt neither love for the children nor the belief that we could raise them to be decent individuals. In the end, we contacted Brittany's parents and decided to cease all involvement with the children. It seemed the children themselves understood our firm stance, as Ricky remarked.
We'd rather stay in a rundown house than staying with a useless couple without kids.
We felt this was for the best, especially since they expressed such sentiments. It's worth noting that we never disclosed to the children the fact that the 2 younger ones were not biologically related to Jimmy. Whether to reveal the truth or not is something we've left to Jimmy, Brittany, and their relatives. Fred and I decided to use the estate Diana left us to make a fresh start by moving to a distant location. It was a place rich in nature with lots of greenery, and both Fred and I were able to fit in quickly. There's a charming waffle shop near our new home, and every time we pass by, I think of Diana and how I would have loved to take her there if she were still alive. Soon after we moved, I was blessed with the child I had long wished for. When I used the pregnancy test and saw the positive result appear, I couldn't help but shout in surprise and overwhelming joy. Later, when I went to the obstetrician-gynecologist and had it confirmed by the doctor, I was assured that I was indeed pregnant without a doubt. Fred and I embraced, both of us shedding tears of joy. I couldn't help but think how happy Diana would have been if she were still alive to witness this. Additionally, the business plan I had been quietly preparing is progressing well. Both Fred and I are working hard for our forthcoming child, leading fulfilling lives filled with happiness.
Your husband and I are starting a business together. We'll take the sales and the employees.
Dorothy and Brian said this with a nasty smirk. I was at a loss for words. As soon as we graduated from college, we started a small business. And this happened just when the business began to turn a profit at last. The 2 cornered me in the office, laughing.
Thanks for everything up to now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can handle it ourselves.
Brian nodded to Dorothy's triumphant words. It seemed they had planned to cut me out all along. I clenched my teeth. For considering them as my best friend and a kind husband. But now I see. This is their true nature. If that's the case, so be it. Dorothy. Brian. I have my pride too. And I won't let you trample on it. Bring it on, Dorothy. I'm Karen. 29 years old. I started a small business with Dorothy and Brian, whom I met in college. We call it a handyman service, but mostly we do household chores for others. When we started, there were no other employees, so we managed all the work between the 3 of us. During that time, Brian proposed to me. I liked him back, so I happily accepted his proposal. Dorothy congratulated us. How kind they both seemed. I thought I was truly blessed with such friends, until the moment I heard this rumor. Dorothy also had feelings for Brian.
I'm off, see you. Be careful on your way.
Brian said to Dorothy in a light tone as she was leaving for work. You get lost easily. I'm fine. I've been to this client's place several times. The car navigation system knows the way perfectly. Dorothy said confidently. Laughter broke out among the employees. Dorothy was everyone's favorite. Ever since college, she was smart but had her ditzy moments, and they loved her for her goofy character. I liked Dorothy too. We hit it off right after entering college and dreamed of starting our own business. Brian joined us midway, and our dream began to take a more concrete shape. And now, here we are, living that dream.
Brian, you should go with her, I'm worried.
Ah, Karen, you sure are demanding. Brian shrugged his shoulders as if he was reluctant. The employees still looked amused. Eventually, an older employee named Jennifer agreed to accompany Dorothy. To be honest, I was a bit uncomfortable around Jennifer. So when she was out of sight, I felt a slight sense of relief. Of course, I would never intend to discriminate against any employee. But Jennifer clearly disliked me. It was obvious. I don't know why.
Jennifer was bad-mouthing you again.
One of the employees whispered to me. It was during break time. I sighed. I don't mind. It's nothing new.
But she was saying awful things. Something like Brian was Dorothy's boyfriend and that you stole him.
What? I dropped the documents I was holding. They scattered across the table. As I hurriedly gathered them up, I tried to muster a smile.
That's terrible. Brian has only ever been interested in me.
But according to Jennifer, Brian and Dorothy were the real couple, and I was just in the way. But it was Brian who confessed his feelings to me, and Dorothy never said anything about it. It must be just another baseless rumor.
Why does Jennifer always speak ill of you?
I don't know. All I could do was shake my head. Jennifer is 63, a veteran among the staff. All I knew was that she lived with her eldest son and his wife after her husband passed away. Just an ordinary woman. So why does she dislike me? Why spread such awful lies? I don't understand. I don't know how to deal with it because I don't understand. Of course, she wasn't always like this. When did it start? Right, it was. On the way home from a welcome party for Jennifer, which was also a get-together with booze.
Maybe it was that day.
That day?
You know, Dorothy is a lightweight. She suddenly started crying that day. Jennifer was comforting and encouraging her, and it started the day after that.
Jennifer was a normal woman. But after that day, she began to dislike me. Why?
Oh, that makes sense.
Another employee, who had been doing paperwork, chimed in.
It's well known among us. Dorothy badmouths you when she's drunk.
What? I blinked in shock.
Hey, that was supposed to be a secret. It's not something that can be hidden forever. Karen, you better be careful around Dorothy. Although, Jennifer is the only one taking the gossip seriously as for now.
The male employee said languidly and returned to his work. I was overwhelmed with disbelief. Dorothy, speaking ill of me.
Yes.
The first employee spoke again, looking uncomfortable.
Dorothy starts talking the moment you're out of sight. It's all made-up stories, terrible gossip.
No way. I thought this must be some kind of joke. Dorothy is my best friend. I can't believe she would say bad things about me.
But the worst part is Brian. Brian?
I wondered why Brian was being brought up in this context. As my expression darkened, the employee continued with difficulty.
Brian, no matter how awful things Dorothy says, he just laughs and seems to enjoy it, even egging her on.
That can't be true. I had stood up from my chair. I picked up my mobile phone. I called Dorothy.
Hello.
Hey, stop joking around now. What joke?
Apparently Jennifer is badmouthing me because of you. That's a horrible story, right?
Well. Dorothy paused, seemingly deep in thought. I was hoping she would quickly declare her innocence. Dorothy wouldn't betray me.
Hey, Dorothy.
What? It was Dorothy's usual, cheerful voice. I felt relieved. After all, what the employees said must be false. Jennifer must have badmouthed me so persistently that everyone started to make up this joke. Seriously.
So you found out all of it? Huh?
I blurted out in a daze. What did Dorothy just say?
I was planning to gradually increase my allies, but no one else fell for it except Jennifer. Maybe it's time to try something different. Dorothy, what are you talking about? Just kidding. Wait, what?
The next moment, Dorothy burst out laughing.
Don't take it seriously, we're friends, right? I would never do such a thing.
Right. I slumped back into my chair, feeling drained. The employees looked at me anxiously. Dorothy was laughing on the other end of the phone. Innocent and lovely Dorothy. She was like everyone's idol. Even now, she's popular among the employees. I like her, too. I thought I did.
It was all a lie, right? Yes, all lies.
Dorothy's affirmation. Jennifer's attitude, and the employees' rumors. I couldn't tell what was true anymore. About Jennifer. I hesitated. Honestly, I didn't want to talk about it. But Jennifer's attitude towards me was strange. I intended to discuss it with Dorothy and Brian.
What's up? She's very harsh towards me. I just think it's going to be hard to work with her moving forward. You're not thinking of firing her, are you?
Brian looked at me sternly. Dorothy's smile had faded too. I was unable to look into their eyes, and I looked down.
But her gossiping is crossing the line. It must be hard being talked about like that.
Dorothy seemed to sympathize with me. She's kind after all, I thought. Then Dorothy said,
"But it's funny to watch, isn't it?" What? Nothing. Karen, think it over. Jennifer is our ace employee, and we've worked together for so long. It would be too cruel to fire her now. I think so too.
Their opinions were the exact opposite of mine. Indeed, many clients have specifically requested Jennifer. Plus, Jennifer was the first employee we hired after starting the company. I have some kind of attachment to her too. But,
like I said before, Jennifer's harshness towards me is because of Dorothy. There are rumors about that. If it's not just me, but Dorothy's reputation falls too.
That's unavoidable,
Dorothy said with a troubled expression.
Because, well, it's the truth. Dorothy. I sighed. Lately, Dorothy has been teasing me excessively. She's manipulating Jennifer to take my place. Even though that can't possibly be true.
Really, Karen, you're too nice,
Brian suddenly said. I looked at him in surprise, and Brian had a smile on his face. A very unpleasant smile. What Dorothy is saying is true. I was dating Dorothy. Brian, not you too.
But along the way, he got greedy.
You were better in both grades and popularity. If anyone was to be the boss, it had to be you. So Brian left me for you, Karen. They took turns speaking. Words I didn't want to hear.
Stop it.
But Karen, you're too naive, aren't you? With that attitude, you can't compete with the cunning folks in other companies.
Stop it!
I shouted. My throat hurt from suddenly raising my voice. As I rubbed my throat, Dorothy started laughing. Just admit it, Karen. It's all true. I've been feeding Jennifer all this, and she's been taking it seriously. I began to tremble at her words.
It's crazy. That's just crazy. Why would you do such thing?
Why? It's obvious, isn't it? Dorothy said, curling her lips.
You stole Brian from me. Not just that. In school, you were always above me in grades. It was always like that. Because of you, I could never be the first. But Dorothy, you were chosen as the most beautiful girl in college. That was because I worked hard to please everyone and put on a friendly face. But what about you, Karen? Without any effort, you made it into the top 10. Don't joke with me. Who's joking now?
I had forgotten about the pain in my throat. Tears were streaming from both eyes. How disgusting. Crying like that.
Exactly. Dorothy's face is still the best. I made a mistake in choosing a partner.
Yes, indeed. Dorothy briefly glared at Brian, probably despising him for his opportunistic nature. But the next moment, she turned a sweet smile and voice to Brian. Come back to me, Brian. No. Dorothy, what are you saying? Right, even without Karen, the company can go on. Maybe, Dorothy, you should be the president, and I can assist you.
You don't want to be the president yourself?
I don't want a role that just dumps responsibilities on me. I'm more suited to being number 2. Brian said this casually. This is nonsense. A nightmare. I need to wake up quickly. I can't endure this any longer. As I was crouching and crying, Dorothy suddenly said, Hey, Karen. If you think you've done anything bad to me, I'll give you a chance to atone. Atone? What sin do I have? About Brian? I really didn't know. But if it's true, I feel sorry. The moment I looked up. Give me this company and Brian. Dorothy said, smiling. Your husband and I are taking over the business. We'll take the sales and employees. The two of them laughed triumphantly. It was a terrifying smirk. I finally understood. They had been planning on using me all along and to kick me out of the company once I'm no longer needed. Thanks for your hard work until now. But we don't need you anymore. Brian and I can manage on our own. That's right, that's right. I'm remarrying Dorothy, so I don't need you anymore. Their words made something inside me snap. They really had the nerve to say whatever they wanted. I have my pride too. To be trampled on so cruelly. I won't just walk away quietly. Silently, I glared at them. Then, it was my turn to smile at them. Suit yourselves. Oh, how magnanimous of you. I slipped past the two of them and walked away. Dorothy still looked proud. She must think I'm being docile out of a sense of defeat. Let her interpret it however she wants. We're not friends anymore, anyway. Brian, I'll write up the divorce papers. Just like that? Brian seemed a bit taken aback. No regrets? You don't fully understand my charm? Whatever. Dorothy crossed her legs, looking pleased with herself. I turned back to them and said, Now, I can go to France without any worries. Huh? Dorothy let out a surprised exclamation. France? What's that about? I got a job offer from a company there. I was turning it down because I was responsible for our company. But I guess that doesn't matter anymore. Yeah. Go wherever you want. After saying that, Dorothy added in a lower voice. What company is it, may I ask? It is. I gave them the name. It was a globally renowned corporation that even children would know in this era. Dorothy's voice and expression grew frantic. Why are you being scouted and not me? I didn't get any offers. Neither did I. Brian added, looking puzzled. Brian, you're just a freebie. Dorothy bluntly stated. Seriously? Brian looked dejected, but in reality, Dorothy and I were the ones who started the business. Brian was more like an assistant, or something like that. He was always like a little chick following behind. Even for Brian, it seems, was upset by Dorothy's manner of speaking. Dorothy, you weren't invited either. That's right. Karen and I were a team. We've been through everything together, so why is it that Karen is the only one getting attention from big companies? I should mention. I said, exasperated. Dorothy might have been doing the publicity and noticeable work, but the important, behind-the-scenes work? That was all me. Like sending emails to clients, for example. Dorothy couldn't be bothered, but I made sure to send a thank you email to every customer. Partly hoping they would use our services again, but mostly because I was happy they chose our company. I kept sending emails, expressing my gratitude. Then, one day,
one of the clients replied. Their grandchild works for the company we just mentioned, and they talked about my work. That led to them wanting to meet me. Come to think of it, you went to France alone last month,
Brian said, suddenly realizing.
Why didn't you tell me sooner? Well, I thought it was just a trip.
Brian seemed to be making excuses. Dorothy looked furious. Until just now, she thought she had one. But again, it turned out to be my victory.
That's why I'm going to France.
I waved my hand and left the office. I heard Dorothy's screams, but I could care less. After signing the divorce papers as agreed, I arranged for a moving company.
Oh, right.
I came up with an idea. I called another company on my mobile phone. Hello. I'd like to sell all the furniture in my house. I'm used to negotiating. I wrapped up the conversation efficiently. Then, there was a noise at the door. Brian had returned.
Hey, Karen. What is it? This house, you bought it, but if you're going to France, you won't need it, right? So, it's fine. I've already arranged to sell the furniture and the house,
I said cheerfully. Brian screamed.
Why would you do such a thing? Where am I supposed to live from tomorrow? Go stay with Dorothy,
I said bluntly. I was a bit surprised by my own words. I realized I had no feelings left for Brian.
You're not selling the company too, are you? That's impossible. Dorothy, my co-owner, would need to agree. Right.
Brian nodded, relieved.
From tomorrow, Dorothy will be running the company alone. Be careful. Dorothy doesn't do anything troublesome. Your threat won't work on me. I'm just warning you,
I said and went to the kitchen.
I'll make dinner. What? Until the divorce is finalized, we are still married. And I have no intention of shirking my duties as a wife.
I've always made meals, every day. No matter how busy, I never neglected my household duties. That was my pride. Though today would be the last time I'd cook for Brian.
Well, then.
Tonight's dinner is beef stew. I splurged a little on some good meat this time. I sautéed it with onions and butter, carefully. With tomato salad and juice, tonight's dinner was ready. We ate facing each other. There was hardly any conversation. But the words Brian said strangely stayed with me.
This is the last time I'll eat your cooking, Karen. Did you like it? It was okay.
Brian, ever childish, never praised my cooking until the end. Yet, I was content. I had remained a good wife till the end. The next day, after confirming the divorce papers were processed, I headed to the office. There was a buzz of activity inside. As I entered, one of the employees approached me.
Karen, is it true you're being forced out of the company?
It's true. I explained again that I was leaving the company and heading to France alone. A murmur spread among the employees. Karen is amazing, as expected.
Karen, we can't run the company without you. I'm quitting this company. Don't say that.
I tried to calm them. But, except for one, they all insisted on quitting. I'll stay. Of course, it was Jennifer who said that. The youngest employee looked at Jennifer accusingly. I stopped them just as they were about to speak. Instead, I spoke.
Jennifer.
Yes? Her reply was curt, as I had grown accustomed to. In fact, thinking I wouldn't hear her voice again made me somewhat sad.
Dorothy is flashy and loves attention. Brian is indecisive and rarely takes initiative. Please take care of those two. That's what I was planning to.
Jennifer glanced at me and nodded, as if she had figured it out all along.
Even if I'm the only employee left, I will support them. I'm not like the other ungrateful employees. What did you say?
Stop. I held them back while looking around the office. I had done well to grow the company this far. What would become of it now, losing all employees except Jennifer? I wouldn't be there to see it anyways.
Karen! What are you doing in our company?
Dorothy's voice rang out. This place was no longer mine. Her footsteps were my cue to leave the office. Next, I headed to a restaurant arranged by the client. And their grandchild waiting for me. We parted with smiles. But I didn't take up their offer. I still had things to do in Japan.
What do you think you're doing?
Dorothy barged into my office while I was working. I looked at her face while sitting.
What? Karen, weren't you going to France? Why are you starting a business in America?
That's right. In the end, I didn't go to France. Instead, I decided to start over in America. The reason was simple.
How could I leave the employees who admire me in a difficult situation? So, you poach our employees and then act like it's nothing.
I didn't poach anyone. They came to me because they couldn't work under you, Dorothy. As they declared, all employees except Jennifer quit Dorothy's company. I couldn't just abandon them and go to France alone. I felt obligated to provide them a stable working environment again.
Jennifer is there for you. One person can't cover everything. And Brian is useless.
Isn't managing a part of your job as a president? I replied nonchalantly. Dorothy groaned, at a loss for words. I sighed and closed my laptop. Dorothy, it's not bad to want things. People need ambition. Whether it's born from an inferiority complex or a motivation, I think it's okay.
Are you lecturing me?
That's not the point. As a president, Dorothy, you have a duty to keep Brian and Jennifer away from difficult situations. And of course, if the business fails, it will affect you too. It would make me sad. That company is like a child to me.
I know that.
Dorothy bit her lip.
But I don't know what to do. Jobs that were coming in smoothly are now reducing. The online reviews are terrible. They write it was better with the former president.
Customers are honest. I shrugged. Do you send thank you emails to your customers? Are you polite to them at work?
Stop nagging!
Dorothy got angry. Such a child. I was amazed at my lack of judgment. Or maybe Dorothy just fooled me well. Probably both. Before showing her true nature, Dorothy seemed kind and graceful. Who knew she was this selfish and childish? Brian seems lost too. Another email. After Dorothy left crying, I opened my laptop again. There was an email from Brian. I didn't even need to check it. He was probably asking if he could join my company, maybe even hinting at reconciliation. How selfish can a man be? Doesn't he feel ashamed to be dependent on a woman? Brian and Dorothy broke up, it seems. A female employee said, bringing a cup of tea. Is that so? They never remarried. As soon as Brian heard about you starting a new business, he initiated the breakup. I heard from him directly. I propped my chin on my hand. I needed to meet Brian to clear things up. That weekend, I called Brian to a cafe near the company. He looked happy. And was overly considerate.
It's been a while. How have you been?
Yes, well. If only you and Dorothy in front of me could get it together, I'd feel more at ease. But Brian's attitude suggested that was unlikely.
The food tastes better when I'm looking at your face, Karen. Oh, but the food you cooked was even better.
Is that so? Even though he never once praised my cooking while we were married. I checked my watch and said shortly, I have no intention of remarrying you, nor hiring you at my company. Don't say that. For the sake of our past as a couple.
We're no longer a couple.
I dismissed Brian's wishful thinking.
Well then, I'll be going. Wait!
If you persist, I might have to consult a lawyer.
What?
At the mention of a lawyer, Brian looked frightened. Good. Cowardly Brian wouldn't have the nerve to bother me further. I paid for my share and decided to return to the office. Brian, holding his wallet, shouted,
You called me here and you want to split the bills? Are you offering to pay the full amount?
Leaving a groaning Brian behind, I left the cafe. Unfortunately, the company Dorothy ran went under. Poor reviews and her attitude drove customers away. It's a pity for Jennifer, who lost her job, but it couldn't be helped. Please, hire me at your company. Please, I beg you. Now, they are both bowing their heads to me. After all their arrogance towards me, what could you possibly say to me? Please leave. I said very politely, yet distantly.
There's no place for you here. It's because you started a rival company.
Dorothy exposed her true self again. Brian was shocked, but Dorothy kept shouting.
I know all our customers went to your place.
I didn't lead them there. I spoke in a soothing tone. Both the employees and the customers made their choices on their own. Do you think I alone could influence so many people? Dorothy knew the truth deep down. What was right and what was wrong. The mistake of driving me out of the company. Her failure to take her duty as president seriously. It all comes down to one thing, people's trust. Now, both of you, please leave. If you continue to make a scene, I'll have to call the police.
No way!
Brian cried out in pain, while Dorothy cradled her head and crouched down. Leaving those two behind, I returned to my work. There are customers and employees waiting for me. I can't afford to stop. Anthony. That's the name of the person who introduced me to the large corporation. He works there himself and has started contacting me regularly since then. I enjoy talking to him a lot. Informative, and his choice of words is laced with humor. I'm glad I got to know you, Karen. He wrote in one of his emails, in a heartfelt tone. It's been a while since I've had a Japanese friend, being abroad. Friend. That word pained my heart. I was betrayed by those I thought were my closest friends. But I emerged victorious. I'm not weak enough to be outdone and left behind. That incident made me realize my strength. After some hesitation, I replied, I'm also glad to have met you, Anthony. If you ever come back to America, let me know. I'd be happy to have a meal together. I still can't use the word friend. It's not Anthony, but the word friend I'm wary of. Yet, I'm confident that soon I can call Anthony a friend. I can't be rude to someone who opens their heart to me. Especially when I'm starting to trust Anthony. Speaking of trust, the same goes for my employees. I am still grateful to them for believing in me and following me.
Karen.
Yes, yes. Responding to the puppyish call, I stand up from my chair. Feeling myself naturally giving a smile on my face. A life without kids is just miserable. My daughter Laura is both adorable and a genius. William said that with a smirk, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of uncontrollable anger. It was like he'd forgotten all he's done to me, and then he just came up to talk to me with that nonsense. I couldn't help but be furious. However, I remembered the situation I was in and managed to suppress my anger. Trying to appear as cheerful as possible, I decided to reply to him. Even if he gets mad at it, it's nothing compared to what I've endured. I called my daughter, who was a little distance away, and proudly said, Okay, let me also introduce my daughter, Jasmine. I'm probably wearing the kind of smile I imagine. While showing that to him, I hugged Jasmine, who ran up to me.
What?
He looked at us, his mouth agape in surprise. He probably couldn't accept the reality he had always looked down upon. His mistress Kate, who was grinning just like him until a moment ago, also seemed unable to hide her shock. While looking at them, I started talking to Jasmine. My name is Isabel, and I'm a 51-year-old office worker. I have a daughter, and people are often surprised when I tell them she's 12. I did marry late, but there were reasons for that. I have a history of divorce, and I didn't have children at that time. I met my ex-husband William in an arrangement that was almost like an arranged marriage. A friend of mine worried about me always working and not getting married, and threw a party for me. That's where William took a liking to me, and I received his advances. Even so, I wasn't interested at first and was reluctant to respond to his actions. Yet, as he approached me persistently, I gradually started to return his feelings. Eventually, we started dating and soon got married. After marriage, William was serious about having children. Being in my late 30s, I felt a lot of pressure. I don't know if it was because of that, but we couldn't have a baby for a long time. Gradually, William's attitude turned cold, and he started to look down on me.
What, infertile? Were you here? Did you pick up the dry cleaning I asked for?
He called me infertile, treating me almost like a slave. It was so frustrating, I struggled to find a solution. I went to the hospital imagining the worst, but there was nothing wrong with me. I was even told that stress might be the cause, which left me feeling hopeless. I tried changing my diet, taking supplements. I tried everything, but still couldn't get pregnant. I suggested William get tested, thinking maybe the problem wasn't with me. Listen, William. I went to the hospital, and they found nothing wrong. So, maybe it's worth considering that the issue might be with you, and you should get tested. As soon as I said that, his face turned red with anger.
What? You're saying I'm the problem? It's just that you can't get pregnant, don't suspect me.
But there's nothing wrong with me, and I've been under treatment for a long time. If we still can't have a baby, it might be because of you.
No way. I'm always fine. The problem is definitely with you, okay?
He completely rejected my suggestion, blaming me. At first, I fought back, but it's hard when someone keeps saying you're the one at fault. Gradually, I became exhausted, and one day, his words made it clear that I couldn't do it anymore.
What's the point of being a woman if you can't even have a baby?
He said it so disdainfully, and I couldn't respond. It wasn't that I agreed with his words. Instead, I was shocked at why I had to be spoken to like that. I worked while managing household chores, and I thought I had devoted myself to him, who was also working. Nevertheless, just because I couldn't have a baby, I never expected to be so thoroughly negated. With no emotional support and losing my motivation, I couldn't bring myself to ask him to get tested again. The thought of hearing the same words again frightened me so much that I couldn't speak up. Sensing that, he started commanding me to do various things.
Man, I'm tired. I want a different drink, not the usual beer today. Hey, you can't get pregnant, so you must be free, right? Come home right now.
Laughing smugly, he treated me like a slave. If I showed any sign of arguing back, he'd hurl even more abuse at me. Still, I endured and just kept going day by day. You'd think I'd better divorce him if I'm putting up with all that. However, I married late and thought I wouldn't be able to marry again if I let that go. Also, I was embarrassed about divorcing and couldn't take that step. Time passed without me being able to do anything, and I turned 38. That's when things took a sudden turn. Even then, I was enduring harassment almost every day about infertility while continuing to work.
Hey, you should know what I don't like by now. I can't eat such terrible food. This is why infertile women.
That day, after he snapped at me like that, I couldn't hold back anymore and argued back.
What does the meal have to do with not having a baby? I can't stand it anymore. Enough is enough.
When I said so, William jumped up and started yelling at me.
What's with that attitude? You can't even fulfill your role as a woman, and now you complain to me when I come back from work.
Suddenly bombarded with nonsensical complaints, I got furious.
What do you mean by a woman's role? If it's about having a baby, you have a responsibility too. I got tested and there was nothing wrong. But you refused to get tested, trying to escape your responsibility. And yet, you only complain about me, which I think is unfair.
He seemed a bit taken aback by my rare rebuttal, but his silence was brief, and he soon started hurling abuses again.
Why are you so stubborn? In times like these, she would immediately reflect and apologize.
Hearing his words, it was my turn to be stunned. Before I could ask who he was talking about, he made a sheepish look and quickly looked away. Then, he left the house without a word. He didn't come home that day, and my distrust in him grew. From his words, it was clear there was another woman. That meant he was cheating, and if I pursued it, I might be able to divorce him. It wouldn't be because I couldn't have children, but because of William's affair. Thinking that, I soon took action. I searched online for a nearby private detective agency and hired them. William was apparently cheating recently. I had them investigate his mistress and his behavior. A few weeks after my request, the results came from the agency. During that time, William would come home but wouldn't meet my eyes. He seemed to be avoiding me, and the constant verbal abuse had stopped. Surprised at how comfortably I was living, I regretted not taking action sooner. I should have done this earlier. While thinking that, I looked at the report. It contained the fact that William was having an affair with evidence. It also included a report on his mistress. Her name was Kate. She was 23 years old, naturally younger than both of us. It seemed they started dating soon after I first suggested William get tested. So, he had been cheating for a few years. Angered by the fact, I decided to divorce him and started preparations. While I was preparing, he stayed quiet. That allowed me to steadily proceed, and I finally confronted him about the divorce.
William, there's something I need to talk about. It's not about the test, it's more important.
When I said that, he looked annoyed as he was just back from work.
What now at this time? I've got something to tell you, too. Make it quick.
Saying so wearily, he still seemed to be listening while operating his mobile phone. Before he changed his mind, I quickly presented him with the report from the private detective agency.
You're having an affair. I've had it properly investigated, so there's no escaping it. With both the baby issue and your affair, I can't take it anymore. I want a divorce.
Saying that, I also presented a half-filled divorce application as a sign of my resolve. Far from being flustered, he smirked and took the divorce papers from my hand.
Ha, you're well prepared. Such perfect timing makes me doubt your predictive abilities.
As he said that and operated his mobile phone, the sound of the front door opening echoed.
Good evening. Nice to meet you. I'm Kate, the one who's going to marry William next.
Entering from the entrance was the person in the photo enclosed in the report. Younger and cuter than she appeared in the photo, Kate greeted me with a grin.
I was just about to introduce you today. I never imagined you'd prepare the divorce papers. If you were always this considerate, I might have stayed, but it's too late now.
While half laughing, he entered the living room with the divorce papers in hand. Stunned by the sudden turn of events, I stood frozen, unable to grasp the situation. After a while, William came out of the living room, having signed the divorce papers. Handing them to me with a smirk, he said,
It saved me a lot of trouble. We're no longer a couple, so leave immediately. Kate's pregnant, and I want her to spend her time as stress-free as possible.
With Kate and William smirking maliciously, I lost myself. I snatched the divorce papers from his hand and rushed into my room. Then, I grabbed my already packed bags and left the house without a word. 13 years later since then, I was visiting a project I had been involved in that had just been completed. I work as a specialist consultant, and this time I was in charge of designing a condominium that was disaster-resistant and supportive of childcare. At that time, after being introduced to Kate by William, I took refuge in a nearby Holiday Inn. I waited for dawn, then submitted the divorce papers to City Hall and moved from hotel to motel. Eventually, I moved into a house and devoted myself to my work. My mood lightened after divorcing William, and work went smoothly, with increased business opportunities and networking. Thanks to that, I was appointed as a project leader, which led to this urban development project. Now that the long-term project was finally complete, I felt relieved. There was a small event, and the place was crowded. Suddenly, I heard a familiar, unpleasant voice.
Hey, long time no see. Still all alone? I'm here to buy a condo for a family of 3. Not that it matters to you.
I regretfully turned towards the voice and regretted it. There stood William and Kate. Between them, there was their daughter, who must have been in Kate's womb at that time.
A life without kids is just miserable. My daughter is both adorable and a genius.
Seeing William's smirking face, uncontrollable anger surged within me. It was like he forgot all he'd done. casually speaking to me like that. I couldn't help but be furious. As remembering my situation, I managed to suppress my anger. Trying to appear as cheerful as possible, I decided to reply to him. Even if he gets angry, it's nothing compared to what I've endured. I called my daughter, who was a little distance away, and said proudly, "Okay, let me also introduce my daughter." I was probably wearing the kind of smile I had imagined. While showing that to him, I hugged Jasmine, who ran up to me. "Huh?" He looked at us with his mouth agape in surprise. He probably couldn't accept the reality he had always looked down upon. Grinning just like him until a moment ago, Kate seemed unable to hide her shock. While looking at them, I spoke to Jasmine. "Found a spot you want to shoot at?" When I asked, Jasmine smiled brightly and nodded.
"I want to shoot in front of the flower bed you insisted on to the end."
She pointed to the flower bed and ran towards it, picking up the equipment beside me. As I watched her tomboyish figure, Kate screamed,
"That's Jasmine from the video sharing site, right? Why is she calling you Mom?"
At Kate's words, their daughter spoke up.
"That's right. Wow, meeting the real deal. Hey, can I get an autograph?" "That's a good idea, Laura. You really are a genius."
Impressed by their arrogant attitude, true to their nature as parent and child, I shrugged my shoulders and firmly declined. "Sorry, but you can't. Jasmine does video posting voluntarily. She enjoys shooting and editing. It's not about being famous. Sure, she's become well known, but that's not what she wants to do."
"Well, it wouldn't hurt, right? After all, Laura is a genius. A combination of a popular person and a genius makes a good story."
Listening to William proudly proclaiming his daughter's genius, I asked, weary, "What exactly makes your daughter a genius?" "So far, I only see a lack of common sense and arrogance."
"How dare you say that? Laura has a lot of things to be good at."
I wanted to see concrete examples of her genius, but found nothing specific in Kate's claims, causing me to sigh. Seeing that, William, displeased with my attitude, began to brag more about Laura.
"You know, Laura never sticks to anything. Too much of a genius, she masters everything too quickly. She's tried so many hobbies but gets bored as soon as she excels. Oh boy, the troubles of having a genius child."
Hearing what hardly sounded like a boast, I grew tired. Without much response to his bragging, I moved towards where Jasmine was filming. Behind me, William's family were saying something, but I ignored them and called out to my daughter. "Jasmine, how's the shooting going? Let's go to a cafe when you're done." Jasmine was surrounded by a crowd of people watching her film. Some of them seemed to realize she was Jasmine, making the scene quite lively.
"Just need to shoot the ending, and we're done. Hang on a bit longer,"
she cheerfully answered, waving to the people around her before starting the final scene.
"Hey, Jasmine! Film with me."
In an oblivious moment, Laura interrupted the filming. Noticing it, Jasmine smiled at Laura and resumed shooting. After finally finishing, Jasmine found herself encircled by onlookers. Like Laura, they asked for autographs, but she politely declined. Instead, she chatted and interacted joyfully with those who approached her. She was continuing her activities because she enjoyed them, not because she wanted fame. Despite her fame, she never boasted about it. Of course, she hadn't thought about giving autographs, so she couldn't offer one. Then, it would be good to communicate a bit as a way of returning the favor to those who approached her. That's what Jasmine has been thinking and acting on. Laura had interrupted her earlier, but Jasmine wanted to maintain her composure. In fact, I wonder if Laura really understood Jasmine's gentle refusal. After finishing conversations with most people, Jasmine was about to leave. Laura approached her predictably. She didn't understand Jasmine's intentions.
"The filming's done, right? So, film with me next."
Seeing Jasmine staring at Laura in astonishment, I couldn't hold back and intervened. "Sorry, but Jasmine doesn't do collaborations. That smile earlier was just a polite response to your interruption during filming."
"What's that, pleasantries? Learning such things as a child, aren't you raising her wrong?"
Kate interjected sarcastically, looking down at Jasmine with crossed arms. Jasmine briefly frowned but remained silent, not retorting to Kate. Seeing that, Kate became more confident and pressed further.
So, are you saying Laura isn't worth filming with? Laura can do anything, she's a genius. It's actually an opportunity to enhance your image. Why don't you read the situation better?
Overwhelmed by that, Jasmine looked at me for guidance. Receiving her gaze, I sighed and replied to Kate, "Enough already."
You keep calling your daughter a genius, but there's not a single concrete example. Isn't there something more substantial to boast about?
As I said it, the people around us, who had been listening to our conversation, agreed. Pressed by their words, Kate made a displeased face, but Laura seemed unfazed. Instead, she proudly boasted about her accomplishments.
I got an award at a piano recital. It was for practicing well. And also, at dance school for learning a whole song. I also got an award for never missing school. I've been awarded a lot.
Laura was at least over grade 7. Thinking about it, her statements seemed awkward, to say the least. Unaware of that, Laura looked at us expectantly for praise. I exchanged a troubled look with Jasmine, and we could only make helpless faces. The people around us seemed to feel the same, with some even bursting into laughter. Even Kate seemed to read the atmosphere and tried to change the subject forcibly.
By the way, since you're active like this, how much do you earn? You can't possibly afford to live in a condo like this, can you?
Her question seemed desperate, but I decided to reply to avoid rehashing the atmosphere.
Thankfully, we're quite popular on the video sharing site. Of course, we earn an income, but it's saved for Jasmine's future and for buying necessary filming equipment. Sure, this condo is attractive, but we have a house, so we don't need it. Besides, I was part of creating this place, so the success fee is substantial. My current husband runs a company, and combined with his income, moving here wouldn't be a bad idea.
I told her everything she might have wanted to know. Predictably, Kate looked displeased and glared at Jasmine and me. Hearing my story, William seemed too surprised to retort. Whereas, Kate was ever bold, and tried to ingratiate herself with me.
So, you created this place. Then, with just a word from you, we could live here, right? Our kids are about the same age, so out of kindness, could you help us?
I couldn't understand what she meant by kindness, but I had no intention of agreeing. Just as I was about to firmly refuse, Laura asked eagerly by misunderstanding something.
Can you really help us live in this condo? We want to live here. Please.
At her words, I sighed deeply in exasperation. I decided to set the record straight for once and all.
Sorry, but I can't guarantee you can live here. Sure, I might be able to refer you to the management company with my connections, but there are screenings. Things like what job you do, your income, and your prospects. I'm not in charge of the screenings, so it's not guaranteed.
It's up to you, so good luck with that. Hearing that, Kate made her face, while Laura didn't seem to fully understand. Then William butted in, making an unreasonable demand.
My daughter's asking, so make it happen. If you have the connections for creating this place, get us through the screening.
Everyone around whispered at his absurd demand. I pondered how to explain the obvious fact, my head aching.
You can't just interfere in the screening process, can you? That's obviously out of my jurisdiction. If you want to live here, overcome it with your own efforts.
When I said that, William suddenly became enraged and started to rampage. He began ripping out the flowers from the nearby flower bed and throwing them at me. I stood in the way to protect Jasmine from getting hit while scolding him. However, for some reason, Kate and Laura followed his lead and started doing the same. Furthermore, while hurling the flowers, Kate shouted insults at us, and Laura hurled verbal abuse at Jasmine. I was busy protecting Jasmine, but people around us started to intervene to stop them. Nonetheless, the three of them refused to listen and kept throwing anything they could grab. Kate picked up a stone lying nearby and was about to throw it. I grabbed her arm to stop her from hitting Jasmine, but Kate carried away and pushed me. Thus, I fell into the flower bed, hitting my head. Seeing that, people around us condemned them more vehemently and tried desperately to stop them. Yet, the three of them continued to act wildly and were soon restrained. Someone had called the police, though I didn't know who, and they arrived upon hearing the commotion.
Who called the cops?
As the police officers restrained him, William shouted, but no one responded. Kate also was restrained by the police and tried to find out who had reported them. Laura stopped her tantrum but began crying upon seeing her parents being held by the police. The noisy scene was suddenly overtaken by the commanding voice of a police officer.
"You're under arrest for obstructing official duties."
With those words, the place became silent instantly. It seemed William had attacked a police officer and was being arrested on the spot. Holding my head and hugging Jasmine, who was close to tears, I watched the scene unfold. As William was taken away, Kate and Laura were also escorted to the police station. The three of them were put in a police car and gradually disappeared from view. After such a huge uproar caused by William's family, I felt drained as they were easily taken away by the police. Meanwhile, I came to myself by Jasmine's desperate yell.
"Mom, you're hurt. Should we go to the hospital? Otherwise, you will."
Affected by the chaos, Jasmine finally burst into tears. I hugged her, apologizing for involving her in such an incident. The people around us also expressed their concern, making me feel cared for. Though I was in pain, the fact that Jasmine was safe made it seem insignificant. Every time someone asked, I assured them I was fine, and soon the sound of an ambulance siren was heard. Apparently, someone had called an ambulance as well. When the ambulance arrived, I was taken away with the police officers. As I boarded the ambulance with Jasmine, I glanced back at the flower bed where the flowers had been torn out. As being involved in the construction of a large condominium, I had wanted to mitigate its oppressive presence. So, I established a park on the property and planted flower beds there. I hoped the park would become a place of rest and foster enjoyable conversations. I met my current husband in a park, taking a break from work and admiring the flower beds. He approached me, and we started talking, eventually becoming close. Initially, we only met during lunch breaks, but gradually we began dining out and eventually married. Soon after, we were blessed with Jasmine, and despite it being a late pregnancy, she was born safely. That park with the flower beds had brought me happiness. Therefore, in the projects I was involved in, I wanted to create opportunities for others to find happiness. That was the idea behind that flower bed. Its destruction saddened me deeply, and I was quite shocked. Upon reaching the hospital, treatment began immediately, and I needed a few stitches. Thankfully, it wasn't visible, much to my relief. Seeing it, Jasmine seemed reassured, and by the time we left the hospital, she was smiling again. While waiting for the bill, I was questioned by the police and decided to file a complaint. I also decided to hire a lawyer and ensure that William's family faced appropriate consequences. Thanks to that, Kate was arrested for assault. According to the lawyer, with her parents in police custody, Laura was taken in by Kate's parents. I thought that was unfortunate enough, but she was in for strict re-education from her grandparents. Taken in by her grandparents, she was apparently reprimanded and criticized greatly for her usual behavior. Due to her young age, it seems she is being disciplined strictly for rehabilitation. It will likely lead to challenging days ahead for not only William and Kate but also for Laura. As for me, my injury has been healing well since then. I had the stitches removed recently, so there's no significant injury anymore. Jasmine has become even more popular since that day and has been busy. It turns out that it was one of her followers who called the police and ambulance. After the filming ended, sensing the tense atmosphere, Jasmine quickly switched to live streaming. Thanks to that, when the brawl escalated, one of her followers took action. We are truly grateful for that, as it helped bring the situation under control. Afterward, Jasmine wanted to thank the person and made a call out in a video, but no one came forward. So, we decided to post another video expressing our gratitude. When we went to film the video at the park where the disturbance occurred, we found the flower bed beautifully restored. Apparently, volunteers had fixed it up after the incident, which was a relief. Since then, things have been going surprisingly well. My work on the condominium has led to an increased evaluation of my job. I've been promoted and now am the head of the planning department. Jasmine's video views have skyrocketed, and she continues to post videos joyfully. My current husband is very concerned about us and has been quite worried. Though I'm fully healed and there are no hindrances to my life, he still occasionally checks on my injury. I'm really happy to be with the kind-hearted husband and Jasmine grow up healthy. There are no problems in my work or family life. I look forward to spending more happy times with three of us.
It's unthinkable to ask for food money. Taking money from your family is shameful, you should realize that.
As my son's wife shouted, glaring at my husband and me, I thought to myself that what's truly unthinkable is her behavior. Unthinkable indeed, you fool. People say your daughter-in-law is a stranger, and it couldn't be more true. Such a brazen woman, she's not part of my family. The one who silenced my daughter-in-law was a single remark from our beloved grandchild. I am Lily, a 65-year-old housewife. I've been married to my husband Thomas for 40 years. We have 2 sons, both of them have their own families now. My eldest son, Michael, lives nearby. He has an 8-year-old daughter, but we rarely see her due to her busy school schedule. However, the last person you want to see is often the one who shows up uninvited. Lily, do you have anything you don't need? I'll take it off your hands. The loud one at the front door is Michael's wife, Emma. I've disliked her ever since my son married her. Looking back, she was always a bit off. She boldly asked about my husband's salary and our savings.
Emma, you shouldn't ask such things, even to family. It can upset people.
I once said to her, in a lecturing tone. Eh? Why not? We're family. My parents tell me everything. Oh, by the way, they said they hardly have any savings. Seeing her laugh, I felt drained. Later, my younger son's wife said, Lily, I need to talk to you about my sister-in-law. The content was unbelievable. At that time, she was struggling to conceive and was undergoing treatment. Why don't you have kids? You should have them while you're young, it gets harder as you get older. Such meddling made her neurotic. Even when Michael scolded his wife, she showed no remorse.
I was just giving advice as a mother,
she defiantly claimed. But after successful treatment, a grandson was born to my younger son. Then, this time, Emma sent a message.
Just because you had a boy doesn't mean he's the heir, right? My daughter is the first grandchild and the eldest son Michael's child.
To the second son's wife soon after giving birth. This incident caused my younger son's family to move away, reducing our meetings to a few times a year. Children grow up watching their parents, and looking at Emma's parents, it might not be entirely false. My husband sighed deeply. Emma's parents, living in the countryside, were equally strange. Every year at Thanksgiving, we send gifts to those who've been kind to us, including Emma's parents. One year, I received a phone call from Emma's parents.
Hello?
I was taken aback. So, you know, the assortment of sweets and towels is fine, but we were thinking meat would be better, right? What is she talking about? It's the thought that counts, and besides, we've never received a Thanksgiving gift from Emma's parents. Yet, they had the audacity to say such things. I was hesitant, but when I told Michael about the call, he immediately scolded his wife. I should have told you what they like. Sorry. Next year, please send them their favorite things. I was stunned by her audacious response.
Emma, that's not the point. We sent those gifts with love, but both my husband and I felt very offended. We never receive anything from your parents, so we'll refrain next year. We don't want to impose,
I said and abruptly hung up the phone. Emma's causing friction in our family. She's odd, we should keep our distance. But contrary to my wishes, when my granddaughter Aria started elementary school, Michael's family moved close to our house. This house will be well taken care of by our family. Lily, you and your husband can comfortably move into a home for the elderly. When she said this with a smile, both my husband and I were speechless. In essence, she meant they wouldn't care for us but would take the house. We didn't expect care from them, especially not from Emma. But living nearby meant we'd frequent use the same supermarket. When I go shopping, there's an 80% chance I run into Emma. Oh? Lily, are you shopping too? What a coincidence, so am I. Emma says this, but I'm not a fool either. She must have seen me leaving our apartment for the supermarket. And her goal was clear, just one thing. These, I saw on TV. They were delicious. This is also recommended. And this too. She would unceremoniously add items to my shopping cart. I live with just my husband, we can't eat all of these. Even I put things back, she'd quickly return them to my cart, saying, "It's fine, I'll take them, don't worry about it." Fine for what? I thought, but with neighbors and friends working at the supermarket, I couldn't raise my voice. After I paid, she brazenly opened the packages as if they were her share and stuffed them into plastic bags, then into her own shopping bags. Even with a 10-pack of eggs, she'd say, "You can't eat all these, right? I'll take some." And open the pack herself. That finally made me angry. I use eggs every day, it's okay. Please give them back. And this meat too, I'll freeze any leftovers. When I said this, Michael and Aria both love eggs. I want them to eat a lot. And meat too. But, you know, Michael's salary has been cut recently. She showed a visibly downcast appearance. Looking at her shopping bag, it was mostly discounted items. Because of her loud voice, other shoppers looked at us strangely. On a day I didn't encounter her at the supermarket, a neighbor working there stopped me to say, "Can't you do something about your son's wife?" Asking for more discounts, not listening when we say we don't put sale stickers on items in the cart. Her embarrassing behavior made me feel like my face was on fire. Give me a break. My head's going to explode. Most of my conversations with my eldest son Michael became about his wife. That weekend, Michael and his unusually serious-faced wife Emma came over. As soon as she entered the room, "Lily, I got too comfortable thinking we're family. I'm sorry for the trouble at the supermarket. I'll refrain from such embarrassing behavior from now on." Is this really the same woman? She seemed genuinely remorseful. I later learned from my son that they had a serious fight. He threatened divorce if there wasn't an improvement, which seemingly changed her attitude. Life was peaceful for a while. But people don't change that easily. After that, I felt awkward using the supermarket, so I started ordering groceries online. Then, my son's wife began bringing my granddaughter Aria to visit regularly. "Grandma, I drew this." She showed us a well-drawn picture. "Oh my. Aria, your colored pencils are quite short," I remarked. I want to buy her new pencils, but things are tough. "Sorry, Aria," Emma interjected. Seeing this, my husband took out his wallet. "Here, buy Aria some new pencils with this," and gave her a small amount of money. She continued visiting, saying Aria's shoes were too small or she needed new clothes, always appealing to us. Sometimes she'd boldly enter our kitchen and ask, "Do you have anything you don't need?" Hey, is Michael's company really struggling that much? And if life is so hard, why doesn't Emma work? She's been a housewife since marriage, at home during the day. My daughter-in-law, Emma, has been a housewife ever since she got married, and seen to be at home during the day. If she could use that time for part-time, her life would be a little easier. My husband and I often discussed this. That's the point. Then, out of the blue, my eldest son's family came over. "We're thinking of moving in here." A completely unexpected proposition. My husband and I exchanged glances. "Sorry to spring this on you, Dad, Mom." Emma suddenly started insisting on living together. "See, you got your way. Let's go home." My son tried to take her home, but she stubbornly refused, and it was getting nowhere. My husband, having had enough, said, "If you're that insistent, we won't ask for rent. But you'll have to split the food costs with us. We're living on a pension, after all." Then, she stopped in her tracks. "It's unthinkable to ask for food money."
Taking money from your family is shameful. You should realize that.
She came back with an outrageous response. Aren't you the one who should be embarrassed? And then,
If that's how you feel, then we are done as of today. And of course, I'll never let you see Arya again.
I watched her fury in silence. Thinking back, ever since she came into our lives, I've never had a day of peace. I've tolerated her because she's my eldest son's choice, but now I've reached my limit. I'll only cut ties with her alone and secretly ask Michael to let us meet our granddaughter. When I was thinking this,
Hey, what does disowning mean? Like, not seeing each other anymore? If that's the case, I want to disown Mom.
everyone was shocked by my granddaughter Arya's words.
Eh? Arya, what are you saying?
Especially Emma, who looked astonished.
Because, Mom, do you know what my friends call you? The beggar. Sometimes they laugh at me, and I don't want to go to school. The one who's embarrassing is you.
Arya's face looked like she was about to cry. Apparently, Emma had been making begging attacks on the parents of Arya's friends too.
Besides, you buy things you like, but my clothes and shoes are old. You said you'd buy me new colored pencils, but you never do.
Hearing this, I asked,
Eh? What do you mean? We gave you money to buy Arya colored pencils, didn't we? I can't believe it, but did you use it for yourself?
My eldest son's wife made an uncomfortable face and replied,
No. I used it for living expenses. It's hard to get by on just Michael's salary.
My son immediately said,
What money? And you always say that, so I've been working hard. I've been promoted twice since we got married. How much do you need to be satisfied? Or is this about divorce? I told you, if you cause any more trouble for my family or others, there won't be a next time. Above all, you've hurt Arya. You're a failure as a mom.
With his cold words, Emma's eyes filled with tears.
But I can't help it. We were poor growing up. I couldn't have what I wanted. Now I'm an adult. I want to eat and buy what I like. What's wrong with that?
To her crying hysterically, I said,
Don't be ridiculous. Making your child suffer while satisfying your own desires is just an excuse. I have no blood relation to you, and I would have welcomed a good daughter-in-law, but honestly, I only care about Michael and Arya. A foolish woman like you, I disown you.
And with that, she was taken back home by Michael. She probably thought living in our house would save on living expenses. What a joke. We decided to take care of our granddaughter Arya for a while. Because Emma had said,
You're an ungrateful child for repaying kindness with ingratitude.
To her daughter. Thinking she is doing her child a favor just shows she is finished as a mom. Emma insisted on not divorcing, but my son ignored her and forcibly sent her back to her parents' home. Of course, we got many calls from her ridiculous parents, but we ignored them all. The divorce wasn't easy and went to mediation. But thankfully, my son got custody. That's because her arguments were terrible, all about wanting to stay a housewife and not wanting to divorce, with no thought for Arya. Also, my son hadn't told us, but he had been living a repressed life, documented in his diaries. It was also discovered that Emma had been secretly saving a lot of money in her own bank account, which worked in my son's favor regarding the distribution of property. Honestly, I didn't want to give that woman a cent. My son Michael and granddaughter Arya moved out of their apartment to live with us.
Arya, I'm so sorry for making you feel lonely with all my work. I'm really happy you want to live with me.
My son was crying with happiness. Arya looked a bit shy. I thought peaceful days were finally here, but then, a few months later, some unwelcome visitor started ringing our doorbell incessantly while my son was at work and my granddaughter at school.
What?
Looking at the monitor, I saw an unexpected figure.
What do you want? Everything's been settled, right?
Opening the door, there stood Emma, my former daughter-in-law, and her parents, faces filled with anger.
Settled? Don't be ridiculous. Why haven't you paid child support?
Emma's mom's words confused us. Excuse me? We're raising Arya here.
If Emma were to pay, maybe, but why should we?
My husband glared at the three of them, baffled. Then Emma's dad said,
Emma has no income after the divorce. For the time being, your son should be taking care of her. That's why he needs to pay child support for Emma.
Behind her parents, my ex-daughter-in-law looked at me triumphantly. We couldn't help but laugh at such ridiculous statements.
You might want to look up what child support means.
How old is your daughter?
All I see is a healthy adult woman over 30. Did you really pay travel expenses just to come here and say something so foolish?
Following me, my husband added, What you're doing is extortion.
Now that we're divorced, we're strangers. We won't hesitate to call the police next time. To be honest, I've never once considered you family.
He then pulled out his mobile phone. Seeing this, they panicked.
Police? That's ridiculous. We're leaving.
And they left hastily, almost fleeing. Watching them go, we mused.
Those parents seemed normal until the marriage, but you really can't understand people. Child support for a wife? Never heard of such a thing. That woman, crazy till the end.
We laughed for a while, remembering their foolish faces. Apparently, Emma's family was struggling financially. Unbeknownst to us, they had been recipients of TANF for years, receiving it under the pretense of the dad's mental illness. However, it was revealed as fraud following an anonymous tip. They were all healthy, they should have been working. It's infuriating to think such people were getting money meant for those truly in need. They were working and paying fines for a while, but people don't change easily. They were arrested for theft a few months later. They're strangers now, but I hope they continue to struggle. As for us, we've been living peacefully as if it was all a lie. Arya has brightened up and brings friends home more often. Furthermore, my younger son's family decided to move back here for his job transfer. I've been in touch with my daughter-in-law.
Lily, please teach me cooking again. My son is thrilled that he'll get to see everyone more. And he's so excited to play with his cousin Arya after we move.
Looking back, I saw the grandchildren playing happily together, a smile naturally forming on my face. Then, 3 years after the divorce, my son Michael remarried. Her name is Elizabeth, introduced by a friend. She was mistreated by her ex-husband and his family for not being able to have children. Elizabeth is kind and gentle, getting along well with my younger son's wife. Above all, I miss my grandchild Arya very much, and we prepare meals together.
Arya shyly called me mom for the first time the other day. I thought I would never be able to be mom, so I was so happy.
Elizabeth teared up as she told me. I gently patted her back. I'm truly happy that someone as kind-hearted as you became Michael's wife and Arya's mom. Thank you, Elizabeth. Soon, my son's family will move to a new home. Not too far from here. Michael and Arya had a hard time with his ex-wife, but with Elizabeth, they'll surely have peaceful days. My husband and I are planning to start a small garden when we're alone. It seems we'll be able to spend our old age in peace. Thinking about this, I savored our current happiness.
Don't make cakes that taste bad. It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
You threw away the cake? I'm still at work.
I am Karen. I'm 28 years old and work at a bank. I got married last year and am still in the honeymoon phase. My husband, Mark, is 30 and works as a pharmacist. We met on social media, of all places. I love music and often post about my favorite artists. Mark shared my passion for music. At first, we communicated through direct messages. I was hesitant to meet someone I knew only in social media.
But, strangely, I found myself wanting to meet Mark.
He lived about an hour's drive away. It's not far from my home. I figured a meal would be harmless, so I gathered the courage to meet him. Surprisingly, I felt completely at ease, as if we'd met before. Our conversation flowed without a break.
I found myself passionately talking about our favorite artists.
Perhaps because we'd been in touch every day, there was a strangely close feeling. After that, we went out for meals a few times. From good morning to good night, we were in constant contact. Before I knew it, I was eagerly awaiting his messages. And then we officially started dating. It was surprising, even to myself. My mom passed away from illness soon after I started working. We had a close relationship, like friends. Being from a single-parent family, I felt very lonely. That's when Mark came into my life.
To me, Mark was a savior.
He's also very dedicated to his work. When we're together, Mark seems most animated when talking about work. He listens attentively to my work-related issues. And supports me.
That's what I love about Mark.
Mark's mother, Jane, has been incredibly kind since when we started dating. Knowing I don't have parents.
Karen, you can tell me anything. Whether it's troubles or complaints, anything is fine. I want to be close to you. Let's not be formal and just be ourselves.
She always looked out for me. Eating out is nice, but homemade meals are good once in a while, right? She would say like that, and invited me to enjoy her home cooking. When Mark proposed and we decided to get married, she cried tears of joy. Since I don't have parents, we decided not to have a wedding.
Jane, understanding and kind, was all right with that.
After we got married, Jane moved in with us. Mark's father passed away when he was young, and Jane raised him single-handedly. In today's world, where it's normal for women to work, but some people still oppose it.
One of a friend of mine struggled with this problem, so it was on my mind. I love my job and wanted to continue working even after getting married.
But I got married, it wasn't just about what I wanted. When I talked to Jane about this, "Isn't it wonderful to enjoy your work? Of course, I'll help you. I'll do the household chores, so don't worry. It makes me happy to have a job to do. I get restless if I'm not doing something. Leave the cleaning and doing laundry to me." She understood and supported my desire to work, making mother-in-law issues non-existent.
Going out with Jane on days when Mark at work is really fun.
Though everything seems perfect, there is someone I struggle with. Mark has an older brother, Tom, and his wife, Betty. Tom got married 6 years ago and has a 5-year-old daughter, Sally. When we first met after our marriage was decided,
"You seem like you're good at sucking up, getting along well with Jane."
Lucky for you. Her comment, which sounded like sarcasm, left me speechless at our first meeting. I tried to minimize contact with her, but it's not always easy. Betty often leaves Sally with Jane. "I'm going for a drink today, so please let her stay over. She's picky with food, so just give her some bread for now."
She would hand over a single Danish before leaving for her weekly outings. Even if she loves Danish, eating the same thing over and over isn't good.
Jane would say this with a wry smile. But Sally is a really picky eater, only eating sweets or Danish. Sally is smaller than other kids her age. I was a bit concerned but didn't think too deeply about it because she seemed healthy.
Jane adored Sally.
Although I had doubts about Betty's weekly outings, but it made Jane happy, so I let it be. Betty, a stay-at-home wife, dislikes working women. She wasn't pleased about me working. When Mark and I were getting married,
marriage only makes sense with someone who can perfectly manage household chores. Carefully choose someone who can handle quality ingredients to avoid getting sick.
Usually, working women are arrogant, so think it through. She was negative towards me. Betty is stubborn and set in her ways, rarely listening to others. Thanks to Jane's support, Mark and I were able to get married. Even after our marriage, Betty would insult me whenever she saw me.
A woman's worth is in childbearing, not just working.
Start raising kids early.
I doubt you're cut out for it. Working and parenting are totally different.
Career women always seem so self-centered. She constantly belittled me. Amidst this, we decided to celebrate Jane's 60th birthday. Since she's always been so kind, I wanted to do something special for her. Due to a pandemic, we planned to have it at home. As the host of the party, I was in charge of cooking. I knew Jane's favorite dishes and was excited planning the menu. The number of attendees was 6 in total, including my family and Tom's family. I planned to take the afternoon off to prepare for the day. But, due to a sudden issue at work, I had to work the whole day. Such last-minute changes were common in my job. So, I had to adjust my plans. I had planned to cook in the afternoon, but that was no longer possible. I quickly ordered the steaks and appetizers I had previously thought of. When I told Mark about this, "I'll probably finish work earlier, so I can pick them up. Don't worry. The steak will be a hit." I was relieved that we could start at the planned time. I was also planning a surprise,
which made me smile just thinking about it.
Just as I was about to finish work, I received a call. It was from Betty. She rarely made phone calls, so I wondered what was up. She sounded in a bad mood.
"Hey, Karen. Where are you for Jane's 60th birthday celebration? Get ready quickly. You said you were in charge of cooking, but I bet you haven't done anything. I only feed my child with organic products, so don't buy anything weird. Make sure the dishes are photogenic. And where's the key? I can't get in."
She was aggressive right from the start. With so many complaints, I didn't know what to respond to first. But I wasn't late. There was still over an hour until the meeting time, but she acted as if I was delaying things. Also as the food, but all expenses were on us. So she really wasn't in a position to complain.
"Betty, aren't you come a bit early?
There's no one at home right now. Mark will be home soon, so you can ask him then let you in." Her voice sounded as irritated because she wanted to get into the house early. I think she just came early because she had nothing else to do.
"Hurry up! Waiting in this heat is like telling to get heat stroke,"
she said. "Please wait in your car to avoid the heat. It won't be much longer." "Sorry." After I said this,
"Hurry up! I don't want to waste gas."
And she hung up abruptly. It seemed she was upset because Jane happened to be out and nobody was home. I contacted to Mark, and he said he was almost home, so I left her to him. The thought of going back was daunting. Because of worrying about Betty's behavior, I decided to call Mark before heading home to check on things. Then, I learned that Sally was happily playing in a plastic pool Jane had set up at home. Just as I was about to head back, relieved, but I received another call from Betty. Apprehensively, I answered, only to hear,
"Don't make cakes that taste bad." It looked suspicious, so I tasted it first. I felt it so unhealthy, though I threw the garbage out the window.
In an instant, I realized this situation was a complete disaster.
"Did you throw away the cake? I'm still at work, and I didn't make that cake."
Turns out, she had thrown the cake out the window.
Hearing this fact, I panicked.
The cake was actually the highlight of the day, a surprise cake for Jane. Moreover, someone had painstakingly made it for her. Betty refused to believe that I hadn't made it.
"Huh? I can't believe someone who cooks regularly would make a cake like that. I was shocked you were planning to serve it. Shame on you."
And she completely refused to believe it. I decided to rush home to assess the situation. Then, I heard Sally crying over the phone. The worst possible turn of events. Apparently, the cake had fallen where Tom and Sally were playing outside. The cake was a surprise that Tom and Sally had made for Jane the day before. Originally, I had planned to make the cake. While talking to Mark, I learned Sally was enjoying helping out in the kitchen. Thinking it would be special, I suggested to Tom that Sally could help make the cake, to which he agreed enthusiastically. Unfortunately, Betty was out at the time and unaware of this. It was a plan to make Jane feel extra special with a cake made by her beloved Sally. Sally's crying was getting louder on the phone. Unable to stay put, I hurried to go home. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Tom was normally calm, but was raising his voice.
Regardless of who made it, it's not right to just throw it away. And who opens the fridge in someone else's house as they please? Don't you have any common sense?
To this, Betty responded,
I just didn't want Sally to eat something strange.
Food is important. Unlike you, I'm taking parenting seriously. Betty and Tom started a heated argument. Jane was desperately trying to comfort Sally. I suspected Betty threw away the cake I made for out of spite. After handing Sally to Tom, Jane angrily confronted the situation.
How can you do something like this? This is not what adults do. Even children understand that. And what's this about organic? Feeding her only Danish all the time is not healthy. She needs a varied diet. Sally is the one suffering. This was the first time I saw Jane was angry. I was shocked.
But she voiced everything I couldn't say. Despite Betty was unyielding. She's just picky.
What's wrong with letting her eat Danish she likes? If I'm going to be criticized for every little thing, I won't bother leaving her with you anymore. I thought I was doing you a favor since you're always so free.
Tom couldn't stay silent.
Doing you a favor? Sally had been taken care of, isn't her? You're out every week, and is it your right attitude?
Tom was right. I knew Jane sometimes canceled her plans for Sally. Realizing Betty brought her over with such intentions made me feel sorry for Sally. Jane couldn't stay quiet either.
What do you think Sally is? Aren't you her mother? It's not okay to leave your child every week to have fun. Have you ever really thought about her picky eating? It won't get better by ignoring it. She barely plays outside, right? Her skin is so pale in the summer.
Betty was furious at this.
Girls should have white skin, and being small is cuter. Playing outside would make me tan too. It's just a cake, and you're blowing this out of proportion. You guys are creepy family.
I had been silent about something until now.
Betty had frequently harassed me.
For example, she secretly added a lot of salt to the food I made, making it too much salty. And some of the accessories I bought during my single days disappeared from our house. I seized the moment to reveal everything. Betty became quiet and embarrassed. Tom was shocked and kept apologizing. The atmosphere was far from celebratory. Tom revealed that he had seen unfamiliar accessories at their home. Betty quieted down after this.
I just borrowed them, that's all. You're making a big deal out of nothing.
Betty's excuses were painfully inadequate. Then, Sally spoke up.
Mom, it's not nice to be mean. If you want something from a friend, you have to ask. My kindergarten teacher said so. If you make a mistake, just say sorry and you can be friends again. If you made a mistake, Mom, just say sorry and it'll be okay. Everyone was instantly soothed by Sally's words.
Tom and his family understandably felt uncomfortable. Tom then said,
Maybe we should go home today.
He suggested. But I knew leaving now wouldn't be good.
It would make it awkward next time.
I insisted they stay.
I didn't want this milestone birthday party to end on a sour note.
I hurried to the fridge. I thought about what I could make with the leftovers from yesterday. Luckily, there was still cream and fruit.
There was still time.
I quickly shifted to hosting a crepe party. We had appetizers and steaks, too. I invited Sally to help me for making crepes. Sally was in a great mood again. Everyone was soothed by her cheerfulness, which helped them reset their emotions. The 60th birthday party for Jane finally started. Betty looked uncomfortable, but today was about celebrating Jane. We all enjoyed steaks, gave presents, and ate crepes. Sally's cheerful demeanor was soothing to everyone.
Children are angels, really.
I later learned that Betty had been quite domineering at home too. Since that incident, she had become much more subdued. In a way, it was a good opportunity, I think. This incident shed light on aspects that were previously unseen. Betty had a habit of overspending, indulging in daily lunches with her friends. Tom confronted her and learned everything. As a result, Tom took over managing their finances, which put an end to her extravagant spending. With less to do at home, Tom encouraged her to start a part-time job. It seemed she's finally feeling the challenges of working outside. It had been a long time since she had worked outside. At her part-time job, a veteran employee told her,
"Someone with such a long break is not useful. It's not worth the hourly wage if you can't learn quickly. Get up to speed and become competent."
It appeared she was being trained quite rigorously. When she returns home unable to do much because of exhausted. Naturally, she's not making homemade organic meals anymore. Their reliance on prepared food from supermarkets were increased. However, there was a positive side to this change.
Sally started eating a lot more.
She was no longer interested in Danish, but in hamburgers, pizzas, and chicken tenders. It seems she had never enjoyed such kid-friendly meals before.
Children generally don't favor organic or low-carb diets.
Now, Sally says,
"For my birthday, I want to eat store-bought hamburgers and fried chicken."
Her appetite has improved.
While junk food isn't great every day, but enjoying what you eat is important. Enjoying food is also a part of food education.
Betty used to post about her organic dishes on social media. They were always stylishly presented, regardless of taste.
But after this incident, she stopped doing that.
It seems she was seeking validation through social media likes. It's the best for being stopped.
She's lucky she didn't end up in divorced.
Since that day, Betty has awkwardly stopped visiting. Now, Tom brings Sally over by himself.
Sally seemed more relaxed and free, even enjoying snacks now.
She appeared noticeably brighter and happier. And Jane is also happy to see the peace. As for us, we continue to live happily with Jane. And now, I'm expecting our first child.
The whole family is overjoyed.
We're all busy preparing baby items for the new addition. I hope we continue to live as a happy family.